Hi, welcome to Evidence for Faith. It's your host, Michael Lane. As we're exploring evidence for David in this series that we're doing called David and the Giants, the second most important piece of evidence that has been found, outside of the first one, which we already talked about in a previous lesson, which was the Tel Dan inscription, this one is the Mesha Stele. Now, the Mesha Stele was discovered, way back in 1868. But, and it was found in an area to the east of the Dead Sea, which is pretty much in Jordan today. But it's sometimes, instead of called the Mesha Stele, it is often called the Moabite stone. And because this was in the country of Moab. Now, even though it was discovered in 1868, it wasn't really until 1994 that this really became very popular and exposed a piece of evidence that we didn't know about before. See, after its initial discovery, and as you can see in the image that we have of this, it's actually this large rock. It's a bluish in color. It's basalt rock, and it's been polished, and they found out it had inscription on it. So when the French found this and started to dig this out of the ground, well, the Arabs, now this is where it gets interesting, the Arabs in the area actually realized, wow, this is going to be important. And so they actually, on their own, they lifted it up out of the soil, set it on the ground. And with nobody around, none of the scholars or anything around, they actually built a fire around the Moabite stone. They actually built a fire on this thing, heating up this basalt rock. Then afterwards, and I have no idea why, they poured cold water on it, which, if you've ever tried heating up stones and pouring on cold water, it makes them fragile, and it broke. When it broke into a lot of different pieces. Now, why did they do this? They had a purpose. The Arabs had a purpose for this. The idea was they knew that the scholars wanted this and that it was going to be worth money. So they poured this on here, the water on there, breaking it up into different pieces. Then they distributed it among other people so that when the scholars came to get this thing and to study it, they would have to buy and spend more money to all different people. So it was a way for the tribe to get money, is what it was. So eventually the French did get it all back together, bought all the pieces, and they took it to France. And today, this piece of evidence, the Moabite stone or the Moabite stele, is actually located in the Louvre in Paris. So that's what we're going to take a look at next as we explore this. So let's let the stone speak for itself about the evidence of King David. Now, let's move to a second piece of evidence. Another one that was found, actually it was almost at the same time. This one came just a little bit later, and it concerns, again, King David, and it's called the Mesha Stele. It's another monument, and there's copies of it. There's one that's in Jerusalem, but there's copies of this. And this beautiful large stone piece has inscriptions written on it as well. This discovery came coincidentally about the same time as the Tel Dan inscription from two French scholars, André Lama and Émile Pouche, were the two people who worked and discovered the inscription, what it was. The stone itself had been known for a long time. Working independently on this stone, by the way, the stone was discovered in 1868 there in the Levant, and it's about 3 feet high, 2 feet wide. Actually, it was found in the country of Jordan, and the person who found it was an Anglican missionary named Frederick Augustus Klein. He is the one who is credited with finding the stone, but he didn't know really what it was. But he is the one who found it. On this stone, which André Lama and Émile Pouche studied the inscriptions to read this and what's on there, it describes, what's inscribed is a description of how King Mesha of Moab was being oppressed by King Omri of Israel. Moab was a very, very tiny country to the east. It's in present-day Jordan, just east of the Dead Sea. But it's recorded in the Bible, this battle taking place and stuff, this fight that took place. And it's in 2 Kings chapter 3, talks about this. Though in the biblical account, 3 kings are mentioned fighting to bring Moab back under control of Egypt, the stele only mentions King Omri of Israel, who ruled from around 885 to about 873, and it mentions King Mesha. The stele also records something else that's very interesting, that it's giving us the Moabite version of the battle. It's not going to follow the biblical account exactly. It gives you Moab's interpretation of what's taking place here. It does not, in other words, it doesn't mention the defeat. It doesn't talk about that. Nations are not going to write on monuments their defeats. We don't do that. Even in ancient time in particular, they did not do that. They would talk about their victories and sometimes embellish their victories, which is sort of like the case in here that we're seeing. So it doesn't mention the defeat as most nations, they just don't record that. This stela records the Moabite version of chapter 3 of 2 Kings. It does not mention the defeat, as most nations, they would never record their defeats anyway on stelas and monuments and things like that. And it doesn't mention the human sacrifice that we read about in the Bible that King Mesha did to drive off the enemy. But it is clear from the inscription that's on here, on this stone, that Israel, it says, did not succeed, which actually is corroborated in the Bible. Now, in the winter issue of Biblical Archaeology Review, this is be the 2022 issue, winter issue, Andre Lama and Emile Pouche, they talk about some scientific testings that they did on this Mesha Stele. You see, the Mesha Stele, this is really important. Even though it's been around since 1868, a lot of scholars did not believe where it's talking about, and when they first published these names of David and stuff like this, they didn't believe that this was true. They thought that this was a forgery done in modern times. So in the issue of 2022 in Biblical Archaeology Review, Lama and Pouche, what they did is they went back and they explained the scientific test that they did to try to see if it is indeed a forgery or if it is actually authentic and everything. So they examine this, and this is what this article is all about. They examine the stele using a new photographic technique that's called RTI. That's reflectance transformation imaging. And by using this, they prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the monument is indeed not a forgery, it is authentic. The name David does appear on here, and it is not something that was added by Christians later on in modern times here to try and make people believe in David. It is authentic. It was actually written. David is on that stela, and it has been found on the Mesha Stele. Plus, again, we have now two strong pieces of evidence talking about King David in the past.
Support the show. Become a donor at evidenceforfaith.org/give.